Russian Foreign Minister Sergey Lavrov recently remarked that Westerners are dangerously balancing on the brink of a direct military clash between nuclear powers, quote unquote. And more recently, the Polish President, Andrzej Sebastian Duda, expressed his desire to host US nuclear assets. Now, in his statements, his statements kicked up a storm and drew a sharp response from Moscow, calling his ambitions provocative. To discuss matters further on where all of this is sort of leading to between the two superpowers, we're joined by Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, former German ambassador to NATO and former European diplomatic and security advisor to German Chancellor Helmut Kohl, who's joining us from Normandy. A very warm welcome to you, sir, right here on WION. Pleasure speaking with you always. I wanted to get your thoughts on this, starting before anything else. Can Poland really host US nuclear assets?
I've read this, that Duda has expressed this wish. Poland would like to host nuclear assets of US, as up till now in NATO it's done by Britain, by Germany, by Belgium, the Netherlands and Italy, because these countries have certain nuclear assets of the Americans, but under American control. And if Poland wants to have these assets in order to reassure itself against, let's say, the Russian neighbor in the east, well, this would change NATO strategy, NATO doctrine to some extent, in my view. And it's a story that has to discuss within NATO,
yes,
between the Americans and the allies, and then to see, because it would mean nuclear forward defense, yes, in NATO.
Mr. Bitterlich, now I just wanted to also understand from you, this is for all our viewers as well, there was a founding act on NATO-Russia relations, which Poland had also signed up to in 1999 when it joined the NATO bloc, that all pre-existing acts and regulations and all the obligations that Poland will also have to oblige all of those. Now that restricts new members of NATO to host nuclear assets. Going by that, do you feel Poland would be stepping beyond its ambit to host nuclear assets, even if though it wishes to? Can it possibly happen?
Well, because when you look back to this famous NATO Russia Act of 1999, it has been, let's say, become obsolete or violated by the Russians, by the aggression to Ukraine too. And therefore the cards have to be, let's say, mixed up, yes, again. And therefore, let's remain, let's say, quiet. Let's look at the story as it is. And it's normal that Poland wants to be treated on the same level, for example, as Germany in NATO. And Poland feels much more threatened even than the Germans from the east. Poland is the neighbor of Ukraine. Don't forget that even Putin, in a certain moment, perhaps of weakness, he offered to Poland to divide the Ukraine into two. The west of the Ukraine could go back to Poland, as it has been 100 years ago, in the Kingdom of Poland and Lithuania, and the east would go to Russia. But Poland has never answered to this, let's say, bad offer of Putin, or malicious offer of Putin. And on the other hand, it's normal Poland wants to be considered as a great member state of NATO. And at the same time, threatened, plus a certain paranoia with regard to Russia. Same time, Poland wants to be considered as one of, let's say, the big shots in NATO. And therefore, this desire of Duda, and please, it's not the government who has been asking for, it's Duda. And Duda is there since the PiS nationalistic Polish government. And I wonder whether Donald Tusk, the new prime minister, agrees to these ideas. It's, you know, normally nuclear is something you discuss behind the curtain, yes, not in front of a, not by public declarations. And therefore, even Emmanuel Macron, the French president, has been criticized, as he has been mentioning, let's say, to send troops if there is a serious threat from the Russian side. And you have to remain in nuclear in a certain ambiguity, what I call the constructive ambiguity, where the other side doesn't know exactly what you are doing in fact. And therefore, well, the nuclear doctrine, don't forget, some years ago, the German government, the Greens within the German government, have been in favor of abolishing the nuclear participation of Germany within NATO.
Yes.
The same applies to the left wing of the Social Democrats. It's over since the beginning of this war in Ukraine, launched by Russia. And but what I call is, under these circumstances, it's wise once, let's say, the spirits are a bit coming down to earth again, to reflect seriously how to install exactly the nuclear potential response of the West against any nuclear threat from the East, from Russia.
And Mr. Bitterlich, as you mentioned, that these are talks which usually hold a certain air of ambiguity. They're mostly done behind the curtains. A statement like this, which has made it mainstream, gone across the world, Russia has already reacted to it, and in true Russian fashion, they've not been soft in their response. They've slammed the statements, and they've already mentioned that they are going to consider this strongly in determining their military targets in terms of their defense against NATO, in case of a war situation. I also wanted, from here, just want to kind of now delve into the Russia-Ukraine conflict. What's next in the war at the moment? Because the $95 billion tranche, of course, that the funds have been approved in the lower house of US, and now, is there a timeline for these weapons to finally make it to the Ukrainian front line? By when can we expect Ukraine to get that boost, of that military boost that it has been yearning for since so long?
Yes, Ukraine has been waiting for, let's say, for so long, a certain military boost. They have got on air defense, I think, what they need.
Yes.
That has to be more perfect than it's up till now. Therefore, for example, just 1 week ago, the Germans announced that they will deliver some batteries of Patriot to Ukraine. The next batteries on Iris-T, it's this particular German weapon, will go to the Ukraine too. It's true, this is not yet, let's say, a system as perfect, as nearly perfect as the Israeli system. It's true. I've seen this in the last weeks during the attack of Iran against Israel, and it's normal that Ukraine dreams about, let's say, get the same system at the end of the day, protecting the country as a whole. In my personal view, I think the Ukrainians should have asked less for Leopard tanks than for mobile defense, artillery, and air defense. Air defense, for me, was from the beginning the key of these operations, because the Russians have a certain superiority in the air, and therefore what you need against this is air defense, and second, you need a good midterm artillery. And the West should have delivered more with regard to artillery to the Ukraine and to air defense. It's true. And the Russians, who are, let's say, advancing centimeter by centimeter in areas, but not more. And they are extremely destructive. Look at these attacks against Kyiv in the north of the Ukraine, against population. It's nothing to do with military. It's just trying to, let's say, to demoralize the population in the north of the Ukraine. And when you look at this warfare of the Russians, it's normal. The Ukrainians asked for more, let's say, air defense and more artillery. They have a new weapon which we underestimated altogether in the West, and even not only in the West. These are the drones.
Yes.
I remember 20 years ago, a well-known European company called today Airbus refused to inaugurate and to develop drones 20 years ago.
Yes. Mr.
And
Peterlik.
today, they are the weapon you need at the end of the day. It's the mix the Ukrainians need, and I hope that the US now are able, and I think the Senate will say yes to this package,
Yes.
To deliver more. And in a fast track, what the Ukrainians need, it's air defense and ammunition.
Mr. Peterlik, I'll just like to now come in here. Now, the European Union does not commit to Patriot defense systems for Ukraine. Now, are European nations now concerned about self-defense over militarizing Ukraine? Because this is a very recent statement which came from the EU that they can't be providing the Patriot defense system to Ukraine at the earliest.
So the Germans have done so. They have delivered the Patriot system.
The Americans have done so, but regarding the European nations?
And the Germans have done. The Germans have delivered the last battery on Patriots, I think some weeks ago just, to the Ukraine in order to add. And these are the Americans who may deliver, the Germans in Europe, because this works under auspices of NATO to some extent, not under EU auspices.
All right. And
not all European nations have Patriot.
And from your vast experience, sir, I wanted to understand from you, what do you see Russia's end game being? What's the final game here for them? What do they want to achieve and then finally call it an end to this conflict? Because I've interacted with several Russian minds, I've interacted with several political analysts from Russia or from the European Union who study Russia carefully. A lot of them have come forward and said that Russia doesn't aim to take over the entire state of Ukraine. They don't want to take over Kyiv. They're essentially looking at Odessa. They want to take over the port regions. They want to keep Ukraine off its immediate boundary, and that is where this stands. But as from your perspective, from your vast experience, how do you see, or what do you feel is Russia's end game here?
Russia's end game, in my eyes, is at least an absolute neutralization of Ukraine. This is the minimum of the Russians. That Ukraine should be neutral at the end, not a real army, perhaps guaranteed by different powers from the West and from the East. Yes, but a totally neutral country, but it linked to some extent economically to the West and to the East at the same time, but at least neutral. Or what the Russians think in their mind is Ukraine is part of Russia. This is this old set. And when you look at least, let's say, a provisional ceasefire or peace solution, well, I come back to what I've been writing 2 years ago, before the war broke out. After meetings, my last meetings in Moscow in 2019, it meant neutralization of Ukraine under guarantees, second, association with the EU and with the eastern side, and then Ukraine in a more federal system with more autonomous rights of the different regions, especially in the east. Don't forget that Donbass has been the heart of the Russian armament industry in the past. And for the Russians, the Crimea is something they would, in their mind, speak about their mind, never like to give up. Never. The Crimea has been a gift to the Tsar, Katerina, in the 19th century by the famous Prince Potemkin, who has a certain, let's say, reputation even in Asia. And Potemkin offered the Crimea to the Tsar, and this has become, let's say, the holiday region of the Russians, and at the same time, this important harbor for the Russian Black Sea Fleet.
Yes.
Which is, let's say, out of ice. It's not like in the north. It's not Murmansk. It's not Vladivostok in the east. It's very, let's say, very near Europe, their heart of fleet. And I don't think the Russians would like ever to give up the Crimea. And this was, let's say, at least a provisional peace solution. And this, in my eyes, the Russians accept this. And by the way, they were near, even when you look back to the negotiations they have had in Istanbul,
yes,
they were near such a ceasefire, let's say, in the same direction. And I remember around this date, I had provoked a certain debate in India through another channel of the Indian TV, asking for blue helmets from India for the surveillance of any peace solution. And some people were against, others were in favor. Against those saying, well, Europeans, settle your problems yourself and not with us. I understand.
Sir, India's stance has been clear, and of course, it will be there in Switzerland as well for the peace summit, and it's made it clear that it's not the era of war, but as far as as far as Ukraine is concerned, they have reached out to India as well, and India has offered whatever support it can offer at the moment. And I'd definitely like to thank you for joining in and sharing all your insights from your vast bit of experience. That was Mr. Joachim Bitterlich, former German ambassador to NATO, joining us right here on WION World is One. Thank you so much for all your insights, sir.
It's a pleasure as always.